All right, so today we're going to dive deep into the world of e-waste.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, all those old phones and laptops and TVs just kind of toss aside.
Yeah. What about them?
Well, it turns out there's a whole lot more to it than just chucking them in the trash.
Right, right.
And you specifically ask us to take a closer look at the whole e-waste recycling and refurbishing scene, especially the startups that are popping up everywhere.
Yeah, there's a ton of innovation happening in that space. It's really fascinating to see how they're tackling this challenge.
And what's really interesting is like how much valuable stuff is actually locked up in all those old devices.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking like literal gold mines in our closets, you know?
Okay, maybe not literal gold mines, but you've definitely piqued my interest. So help me understand this when we talk about e-waste. What exactly are we dealing with here, and why should we even care?
So e-waste is basically any electronic device that's reached the end of its life. We're talking smartphones, laptops, TVs, even those old game consoles we can't seem to part with. And the reason we should care is that it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Oh,
On one hand, it's packed with valuable materials like gold, copper, and those rare earth elements that are crucial for all our modern tech. But on the other hand, it contains some pretty hazardous stuff too. Lead, mercury, things that can be a real environmental nightmare if they're not handled properly.
so it's like a ticking time bomb. Valuable, but potentially dangerous.
That's a pretty good way to put it. It's a bit like dismantling a car. You know, you've got valuable metal to salvage, but you don't just want to chuck the whole thing in a landfill.
Right, because of all the harmful fluids and batteries and things like that.
Exactly.
So connecting that back to e-waste, the recycling part makes perfect sense. We're trying to recover those valuable materials and prevent environmental damage.
Right, and that's where these startups come in. They're innovating in every stage of the e-waste life cycle.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. I'm imagining those giant recycling bins where we drop off our old electronics.
Yeah?
That's the collection part, right? But what happens next? Do they just toss it all into one giant shredder?
Huh. Not quite. Sorting is a huge part of the process. It's kind of like separating paper, plastic, and glass in your household recycling. E-waste facilities have to categorize all the different types of electronics because a smartphone needs a very different approach than, say, a refrigerator.
Right. Makes sense. You wouldn't want to mix a lithium-ion battery with a CRT monitor. Things could get a bit explosive. So after they've sorted everything, that's where the dismantling magic happens.
Exactly. They carefully break down the devices to recover those valuable components and make sure any hazardous materials are handled safely.
Okay, so that covers the recycling side of things. But you mentioned refurbishing earlier. Is that just a fancy way of saying fixing up old devices to resell?
It's a bit more than that. Refurbishing is about giving those devices a second life. Think of it like buy a certified pre-owned car. It's been checked out, repaired, and is good to go.
So just like those cars come with a warranty and a bit of peace of mind, refurbished electronics should also meet certain quality and safety standards, right?
Absolutely, and there are some serious perks to going the refurbished route. It extends the product's life cycle, keeps perfectly good tech out of landfills, and of course offers a more affordable option for consumers.
Sounds like a win-win for both our wallets and the planet. Now, I'm curious about the business side of things. How do these e-waste startups actually make money? It can't be all altruism, right?
Oh, definitely not. They've got some pretty clever revenue streams. For one, they often charge collection fees for proper e-waste disposal, kind of like a waste management service. Then there's the money they make from selling those recovered materials back into the market, those precious metals we talked about earlier.
So they're not just recycling, they're actually creating valuable resources for other industries.
Exactly. And of course, there's the revenue generated by selling those refurbished products directly to consumers. Some startups even get creative and resell valuable components that can be used to repair other devices.
So it's like they're the ultimate tech thrift store, finding value in what others discard.
That's a great analogy.
But hold on, with all this talk about hazardous materials and data security, there must be some serious regulations involved, right? It's not like they can just set up shop in their garage and start dismantling phones.
You're absolutely right. Compliance with environmental regulations and safety standards is huge for these startups. They have to be super careful with how they handle hazardous materials. It's kind of like building codes for houses. You know, there are rules in place to protect people and the environment.
Right, just like you wouldn't want a house built without proper wiring, you wouldn't want e-waste processed without stringent safety measures. And what about all the data stored on those devices? People's photos, passwords, all that sensitive information. Do these startups address data security at all?
Absolutely. Data security is a top priority, especially in the refurbishing process. They have to make absolutely sure that all data is completely wiped from those devices before they're resold.
That's reassuring. I'd hate to think my old vacation photos are floating around on some stranger's refurbished phone.
Ah, yeah.
But let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture. What's the market demand like for all this? Are people actually seeking out refurbished electronics and, sustainable tech solutions?
Oh yeah, the demand is growing rapidly. People are becoming much more conscious of their environmental impact, and they're actively looking for eco-friendly options. Refurbished electronics fit perfectly into that trend.
It's kind of like the rise of organic food, right?
Exactly.
As people become more aware of what they're putting into their bodies, they start thinking about the impact of their tech choices too.
Right. And this whole trend towards sustainable tech really ties into the idea of a circular economy, which is basically moving away from that take, make, dispose model and embracing reuse and recycling.
Okay, so instead of just consuming and discarding, we're talking about a more cyclical approach to tech, right?
Exactly. It's about making the most of what we already have and minimizing our impact on the planet.
All right, so we've established there's a growing market for sustainable tech, and these e-waste startups are playing a crucial role in making it all happen. But I'm curious, how is technology itself shaping this industry? Is it still a lot of manual labor, or are there some high-tech solutions at play?
Oh, there's some seriously cool tech involved. We're talking cutting-edge automation and data analytics that are streamlining the whole process. Think like those massive automated warehouses that Amazon uses. That level of tech is being applied to e-waste sorting and processing.
So instead of relying on manual labor, these startups are using technology to optimize the whole process, which probably helps reduce costs and increase the amount of valuable material they can recover.
Exactly. It's like having a team of expert sorters working around the clock without getting tired or making mistakes. And it doesn't stop there. There's a whole wave of innovation happening in e-waste dismantling, with new tech being developed to extract those valuable materials in a more effective and environmentally friendly way.
So it's not just about doing things faster, it's about doing them better for the planet as well. It sounds like technology is really transforming this whole industry. But before we get too carried away, let's take a breath and recap what we've learned so far. What are the key takeaways our listeners should really remember?
I think the main thing to remember is that e-waste is a resource, not just trash. It's full of valuable materials that can be recovered and reused, which helps reduce pollution and conserve our natural resources. And these startups are finding some seriously ingenious ways to make this happen, not just for the sake of the planet, but also as a viable business model.
Right, and they're tapping into a growing demand for sustainable tech, which aligns with this larger shift toward a circular economy. It's kind of amazing to think that something as, I don't know, seemingly mundane as e-waste can be